Hello everyone, welcome back to some League of Legends DFS Esports Breakdown for February the 9th. As you can see, already slurring, not a good sign. But no, just kidding. I have been up a while. I typically stay up, watch the games, then go to bed. So I'm getting this video out on the earlier side of, getting this video out before I go to sleep and then wake up the next day. I just figured, I usually do it on the other side just because that's when the LPL lineups are typically out, but very rarely do they actually change nowadays. I feel like for the most part, we have pretty consistent lineups. Obviously, I'll try to give out some tweets if anything does change as far as lineups and stuff. But for the most part, I think we could start getting these videos out earlier. We don't necessarily need the lineups. Obviously, it would be nice to have complete confirmation, but for the most part, I think especially for this slate, shouldn't matter too much. So we'll go ahead and quickly get into the recap. Recap was kind of hit or miss. As you can see, the scores for the LNG OMG series have not even updated. That's how quick, turnaround we are at. But LNG did end up taking the series in 3. OMG had their chances. I think this was a pretty close series. Again, this one I'm pretty fine with. I did pick OMG, but at the end of the day, I picked, we talked a little bit more about the bet side of things, over 2.5 that ended up cashing. I just thought the series was closer than the odds suggested, and I feel like I was right in that. The third game didn't go our way. We didn't get the money line. It happens. BLGWE, completely wrong on this one. I did respect WE a good bit before. I think they're going to be... They've been a team I've liked to go to. I just did not expect them to do anything against BLG. Again, you guys have heard me talk about BLG so far. I've had them up in the upper echelons of the league, probably since the first series. Just completely let us down. They just looked pretty awful in some spots. Don't know really what it was. I expect them to bounce back versus EDG pretty solid, but just a pretty terrible series from BLG. Just can't avoid that one really. Over in the LCK side of things, again, we didn't really talk too much about it. The one thing I did mention, of course, was LSB KDF over 2.5. Again, that one cashed. So pretty solid as far as reading the series and stuff so far. Nothing too crazy on that front. Of course, LSB did end up winning the series, but I wasn't really exposed to KDF too much other than that over 2.5. So I was pretty pleased with that. Feel like we have some solid reads so far. We just need to convert them into the best way possible, really. That's kind of all it comes down to. So we'll try to continue to adapt and improve. So we'll go ahead and look to tomorrow. At the first glance of the slate, nothing too interesting. We have 4 pretty solid sized favorites. And honestly, I only really see an interest in one, maybe a second series, but I'm not too confident in it. I'm going to keep this one short. I think the only spot here really on this entire slate that interests me as far as an underdog goes, I think NIP EDGs, it can be a little bit closer than the odds are suggesting. I feel like that I'm kind of a broken record here, in saying that, but that's just kind of how I feel it. I feel like that's kind of been how I've been viewing the game, how I've been successful, I think, somewhat. I don't want to, it sounded conceited, but that's just kind of the success I've had in the LPL, especially just in esports in general. I feel like sometimes, forget it's kind of just kids playing video games. Like, the variance is pretty wide here. Like, we're not, it is the highest level of something. I definitely can, see that. I definitely understand what it takes a lot, but it's still kids playing games. Like, they have shortcomings. Like, the variance is going to be pretty ramped up here. And especially with this EDG team, I'm just not quite I'm not quite bought into the level I guess they're kind of respected at, to be honest. Obviously, they did have the 2-0 over RNG, but again, this RNG team has been pretty uninspiring so far. They got swept up by IG, then they have the win over WE. Like, they're pretty solid. I think that the price tag is like relatively okay, but 275 seems a little steep. The NIP team, again, like, they've had a rough go of it, but especially losing to RA. But they got swept up by JDG, and they actually looked competitive against TES. I don't know. It's pretty interesting. I do think they're going to continue to have Invincible in the top lane over Rich. I think he's looked better. I think he's made that team look better. I think they did end up subbing in Pout over Dream as well. So maybe that is another thing to keep an eye out with this when the rosters do come out. They ended up going with Pout over over Dream, subbing him out in game 2 and 3. So I don't know if they're going to start with that. That's something to keep an eye out. But I think either way, honestly, it doesn't make too much of a difference to me. They actually did, I think, look a little bit better with Pout. Maybe that's just some of the unpredictability that comes with like bringing in somebody that the other team wasn't quite prepared for, maybe. Who knows? But either way, I think the NIP actually looked like relatively solid. I just think this one's a little bit closer than the odds are. I don't want to overcomplicate it too much. Then RNG, JDG. This one does have some concerns to me. Like, I don't know. Again, this one seems kind of weird as well. Like, I feel like you could definitely make a solid case to go look on the RNG side as well, just from the name standpoint. Like, maybe they do bring it together, but at the end of the day, they're 1-3. Like, they've got swept up by EDG, LNG, and IG. I don't think any of those teams are like particularly crazy. Like, they're definitely on the upper side. Like, they're playoff teams. Like, losing to them isn't that shameful, but losing to all three of them in a getting swept fashion. Then if you guys even remember that OMG RNG series that, nearly a month ago, but at the start of the year, even they shouldn't have won those games. Like, you remember it took that like big breathe back door to win the game, and that kind of just like mentally broke OMG. Like, we could definitely very be looking at like an RNG that's 0-4 right now. But on the flip side of that coin, there's still really good pieces there. Like, it's still Breathe, Wei, Ming, Gala, and whatever mid laner they want to go with. Whether they are going to start Angel or whether Tang Yuan comes in, they just haven't pulled it together. And of course, JDG have been looking like the all-star lineup we expected. 6-1 map count. They did drop that one to BLG, but made complete quick work of AL, made NIP look silly. They haven't really been tested. That's the small caveat. I don't know. This one could be interesting as well. I don't want to get too overexposed to this slate. I really don't. Like, I don't love the reasons to go with the underdogs, but I don't love the favorites either, just because there are those red flags and those question marks there. I'm honestly just going to be underinvested in this slate overall, just because there are so many of those red flags and things there. Like, we could definitely, like, if we sit here and like tomorrow rolls around and I'm making the video and we're talking about how RNG beat JDG, we're of course going to be looking at, RNG still have 4 solid players, with maybe Angel comes in and they look pretty solid and cohesive. JDG have yet to been really tested by anyone who's really strong. Of course, they did get tested by JDG or BLG, and they did come out ahead a bit. Who knows? Like, I don't know. I feel like the same could be said for EDG as well. Like, they did beat RNGs, like, not the worst. They lost to IG, beat WE. It's like, it's hard to get a grip on where these teams are. They haven't played too much yet. I don't know. It's just tough. I just don't love those spots. I don't want to just continue to ride this wave, but I feel like over 2.5, especially on the EDG NIP side, I feel like NIP could definitely win one. I feel like they looked pretty solid with Pout and Invincible there. And at least in that last series. And, that's kind of what you need to do, I think, is just kind of maybe buy into these trends a little bit early than you would like. And I feel like if NIP are looking decent, I'll buy in there. And then again, like, I don't know, like, if you look at this RNG team on paper, Breathe, Wei, Angel, Gala, Ming, and they're a gigantic favorite in the LPL, or sorry, not a favorite, a pretty gigantic, like pretty big underdog, plus 265 for this RNG roster. That on paper just feels kind of crazy. Like, you would not be shocked if they actually pulled some form together, pulled something off, and beat JDG here. Like, I feel like you just would not be shocked, and that's just what's scaring me off. Like, all the things, all the logic would dictate you looking at JDG, and kind of calling it a day here, but it's just scary, that's all. Over in the LCK, not much to love really here either. Like, my first glance and first notion is like, I don't know if Damwon should really be this big of a favorite. I know KT kind of blew it, and they've been kind of like, I don't know, kind of all across the board here. But I don't know, if you look at KT, like they lost 2-1 to T1, not terrible. They lost 2-1 to LSB, pretty solid team. They of course lost to KDF, but of course KDF has been looking much better as of late. That's kind of what kickstarted them. Like KT could actually be like kind of decent. Like I feel like when you look at them in the standings, like they're actually pretty close to these teams, slightly above them. I feel like they're kind of getting a tad bit disrespected here. And again, I don't think Damwon's been particularly clean either. Like obviously they barely got through that series versus KDF. They got swept by Gen G. They've beaten up on a bunch of, I think, nobodies other than 2-0ing LSB. That's a pretty solid win. But across the board, I haven't been too impressed with them. I don't know. I don't want to just keep riding this train here. But I think over 2.5 is actually like pretty solid. Like I don't know if KT can win it in 3, but I think they could definitely take one of the first two, especially just with how inconsistent Damwon has been. I don't know, if you look at all of these, like over 2.5 in pretty much every series here, like you're looking at pretty solid like plus money, and I could definitely see these going to game 3. Maybe JDG do take it in 3. That's kind of what they did last year, I think, a lot. EDG, NIP, I think those are two pretty close rosters. Damwon's been shaky, and KT hasn't been as bad as they maybe seem. Like I could definitely see like 2 of these 3 going to 3, and then you're looking at being profitable in the day. I think that's a decent way to approach it. Nongshim Gen G is the one that's kind of throwing a wrench in that. I don't see too many positives for this Nongshim team. I think this one would probably be the one I would be looking at the most to have that 2-0 potential. Obviously, they are the biggest favorite, of course. I don't know. There's still just some red flags there. I don't even want to really mess with the series really at all. I don't see... I just don't see it. Like I don't love the Gen G roster enough to say that they'll get this 2-0. I don't feel comfortable enough to trust them doing that, but I don't trust Nongshim at all either. If I were to, kind of pick a side, I guess it would say the Gen G 2-0, but even then they're at -1.5 is -150. Like do you even want to do anything with that? Not really. So I'm just going to kind of stay away from that. From a DFS standpoint, I do think RNG JDG would be the game you would love to get a piece of either way. I do think JDG, of course, would be the chalkier side. But I think getting RNG at like 15 to 20%-ish makes a lot of sense as well. Honestly, I'd personally pair them up with Gen G over anything else. I do think just because Gen G do have that 2-0 potential, I like that option a good bit. I don't know if I'd quite get to KT. I feel like when Damwon lose, they lose pretty slowly. I don't think that they've been as explosive as people think. I do think that would be my ideal pairing, is looking at Gen G and RNG. But honestly, I don't really love this EDG NIP series, really. I feel like those are 2 relatively slow teams. Let's look over, in the LPL teams, what we're looking at for pace. EDG, NIP. So EDG's on the slower end. NIP is actually kind of up there. I don't know. That averages out like pretty solid, but still, that doesn't inspire me too much. RNG, JDG. I guess RNG is actually kind of like in the same spot, and RNG is like right there as well. So I guess per the numbers, both these series are actually pretty close. But although NIP's game time is pretty low. Yeah, let's just filter them out. Let's just filter and see their JDG, NIP. Am I just blanking on the rest of these teams? EDG and RNG, of course. So, I mean, if we do look at the game times here, EDG and RNG, or JDG, RNG, sorry, are actually like pretty low game time wise. So it's like 0.8 kills per minute at 30 minutes. So what is that, like 18 or something? I don't know. Math might be awful there, but yeah, you're not looking at a lot. I guess 4/5, that'd be 24, something like that. 25, I don't know. I'm not in math. Maybe a little bit over 25 for a total. So I don't know. I just have a feeling there. I can't really describe it. Just I don't feel the pace in that series. Although, I mean, numbers wise, it feels pretty close. So I I don't know. I just like that combo of Gen G again. I feel like Gen G have a good chance of getting that 2-0. Let's look at where let's look at where Nongshim has been in their defeats. See if they've actually been giving up much. T1, I guess LSB would be a pretty good comparison. 13 and 16 kills in their defeats. 18 and 6. Oh man, a 6? That seems pretty tough. I mean, that upside of 18 is interesting enough. Well, look at this Dom 1-1. 13 and 9. Yeah, I don't know. That's 2 single-digit death defeats. Those are not what you need. You definitely need much, much better. So, I don't know. I feel like, again, maybe just getting that sweep would be decent enough for some Gen G pieces as I think a secondary stack. I think that's probably a good way to view that. I don't think a Gen G big like 4-man stack would probably come through. Maybe I feel like getting those like 2 players in the team slot would make a lot of sense. Pair that up with an RNG, of course. Maybe you could do that something similar with NIP as well. And keep an eye out for starting lineups with NIP. I'll probably just retweet the lineups when I see them later. But again, even if it is Dream, whether it's Pout, I don't think that makes a huge difference. I do think it should still be Invincible the top lane. So, yeah, honestly, I'm not loving this slate, especially from a DFS standpoint. I think it's a little bit interesting from betting, just because I do think 2 of these three series that I mentioned could go at that over 2.5, like RNG, JDG, EDG, NIP, and KT Dom 1. I think if 2 of those 3 go over 2.5, I think we're going to be looking at some decent plus money on 2 of those 3. We're profiting. I think that's definitely in the realm of possibility. I feel like these series are a little bit closer than these odds are kind of leaning to be. I feel like these are pretty steep towards the favorite side, but should be interesting. I'm especially interested in that RNG JDG series. I want to see some life from this RNG team. I like these players a good bit. I feel like the quality of these players is too much for them to be this kind of lackluster. So I want to see them step it up. But JDG is tough. They're tough out for sure. So I don't know. That'll be interesting. So I don't know. It'll be fun. We'll see. So. But yeah, I think that'll be it for me tonight or today. Sorry for, I guess, a little bit of a little bit of a different feel for this video, but hopefully you guys appreciate it. Hopefully we can, get these bets rolling, help stem the bleeding from the DFS aspect. So, yeah, that'll be it for me tonight. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I will see you guys all again tomorrow.